I love the Sith code too, but
it's not okay.
Welcome to Covendom, everybody. My name is Levi Rowland. This is my amazing co-host, Brian Cain. We are both high priests in the Alexandrian tradition of witchcraft. Today is Season 3, Episode 2, Part 2. If you were with us the last time, Episode 1, we had a little bit of internet connectivity issues, but we really liked some of the content, so we left it up. So if you want to go back and watch that, if you want to go back and be a part of that and sort of see what we talked about, you can. But we're going to sort of cover a lot of ground today.
Is that out there?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You guys probably can't hear it. Sorry, weird looking face. We're in New Orleans and they're having some sort of event outside of my house because we're actually not in our regular studio. Christian created this new sort of...
The entire thing. From scratch.
This is why I don't do it here. So anyway, we've got dogs. We're at my house. There was no internet down at the French Quarter today, so we decided to sort of try to do it here while we can. So pardon the dogs, pardon the husband. But you probably can't hear what's going on in the park.
They can a little. I see your comments, everybody. Thank you for sharing.
Oh, you can hear it?
You'll probably pick up a little bit. It's New Orleans. We're just gonna...
Nothing we can do about it.
We're
Sorry.
gonna live with the music. It's a blessing, right?
Yes.
But yeah, so today's topic is fertility, witchcraft as a fertility cult. We talked a little bit sort of about what that meant in the last episode, but we thought it was a really important topic, and so because there were some things cut out...
And the topic is?
Witchcraft is a fertility cult.
Yes.
I just said that.
Oh, sorry. I must
He doesn't. Here's the thing.
distracted.
Let me tell you right now, people. Brian can now see himself in above us, so he's not going to pay attention to me at all. Like, there's going to be no interaction today. It's just I could literally make a brilliant point, and it'll just be Brian looking at the camera, going, Let me see. Like, but yes, I see all your comments. Thank you for joining us tonight. Fertility. Witchcraft as a fertility cult. Do you want to do a recap a little bit about what we talked about last time?
So we're going to, obviously, if you did not see last week's episode, we had a lot of technical difficulties because we kept getting interrupted in the internet, as Levi was saying. So, but we did air it because we had a lot of good content in there and we had a few call-in questions that were good. But we didn't feel like we really gave the communication with the audience the fullest attention because we kept getting interrupted. So a lot of people weren't able to call in. And so we decided to do a part 2 where we can take more call-ins on the subject. But we're going to try not to repeat the things we discussed too much last week. So if you did not see that episode, it is on Hex Education, our YouTube channel. If you have not subscribed to that, please subscribe. And so revisit that if you haven't. So we're going to try to cover the material, but basically what we discussed a little bit last week, if some of you might remember, is just why, the fact that all of our elders considered witchcraft to be a fertility cult. That was a part of the basis of the religion. And we discussed that in great length. I thought we could maybe start out, the dog's already going to torment me. I thought we maybe could start out with, how does fertility impact your practice? You know, I think we discussed a lot of like our philosophies and what we do as a tradition and that sort of thing. But how does it affect you in your religious walk as a priest?
Twice a year, I kill a virgin in a field to make the wheat grow.
Is that Tank coming across?
I believe it was.
It sounded like a demon.
He can hear his poodles, by the way.
Yeah, we can hear a lot on this mic. Sorry. And the light is really, really intense. So.
See, I told you, not a thing he'll notice. I literally just said I kill people for my religion.
It's turning
and he's like,
pink from me looking at it
me.
too much.
Look at me.
Anyway, go ahead. Sorry, you were saying?
I made a joke that I kill a virgin in a field twice a year to make the wheat grow, and that's how fertility impacts my religion.
Oh.
And,
me too.
I would. I mean, if God told me to, that's fine.
The wheat fields don't really want virgins, though, do you think?
I mean,
fertility and virginity are not necessarily exclusive or inclusive, I suppose. Levi missed the buttons.
I missed the buttons immensely.
The buttons haven't been working down at the studio. So.
I have to give Elizabeth a shout out in the comments. She goes, "Where do you find 2 virgins a year?" I'm like, in New Orleans? Nowhere.
So for me, I've been thinking a lot about this, and I think that it's really just, I really focus on life force. That's particularly like what I focus on in my religious walk. and my focus in what I introduce to society and what I bring through magically for other people, because I think that encompasses everything that's really important in the human experience. There's plenty of time for death in the grave. We're all going to get there. Don't worry.
Fingers crossed.
Yeah. So, it's particularly what I focus on is the abundance and plenty and blessings and rejuvenation and resurrection that human beings and the other life forces around us that require our custodianship and nurturing, that it is fertility, it is life force that is being brought forward for those issues.
Yeah.
So, if you're thinking about saving the bees and you want to work for saving the bees magically, which, I think would be a very important cause, then you're really working for fertility because you're working to ensure that those bees propagate, that they have healthy lives. This is all that, fertility for crops, fertility for, I said fields and flocks last week. That's what people were doing in their fertility rites. So let's talk about fertility rites, shall we?
Fertility rites, he says.
Fertility rites. Let's think of some fertility rites we know that were commonly used in folk magic.
Blessing the fields.
And how might one bless a field?
So I think it's interesting because
other than killing a virgin.
Okay, well, fine. Take away my dreams.
Or a young man full of vigor.
Oh, yeah, that's the big thing, right? The crown him with king, make him the corn king. First of all, if you need a representation of that, I highly recommend you read the book Harvest Home or watch the made-for-TV movie and starring Bette Davis. Fantastic option. But all joking aside, Christianity, for example, has this, and I think they inherited it from a much older custom where they would go out and use holy water, consecrated water, to literally bless the fields. And there's no way you're going to convince me that that's not a holdover from previous pre-Christian practices.
Oh, absolutely.
So that's an example of fertility magic to bless the fields. Another one is bringing the fields into the home. So a lot of modern folk magic that's been kept has been the making of corn dollies or the man made out of bread at Loaf Mass, which became Lammas. So the idea of whatever the fruits of the particular harvest are, whether it's fruit, wheat, corn, whatever, you would make something special with that, and it's sympathetic magic. Pumpkins at Halloween, right? We're bringing them in. So they used to carve turnips for Samhain in
Ireland.
UK. Yeah, so in the British Isles. So that's a big thing for me is the concept of that sympathy between I'm in a home, I'm not living in the fields, even if I'm a modern practitioner, but I'm still connected to it in some way.
So Levi was bringing up the harvest, the corn dollies. There's actually an old sort of a Cornish custom that I think found its way into different places, Irish communities and things like that. And they would make a corn dolly, and it was made from the last shaft of wheat that was cut from the community, right? And the belief behind it was that last shaft of wheat, the last bushel or whatever it's called, not a farmer clearly, contained the spirit of the harvest. And so they would make the doll out of that, and they would, one particular person, the person who had that field had to keep it through the winter, and it's the origins, some say, of the kitchen witch, because it would be kept in the home. And then in the spring there was a ritual where they would pass it around yelling, the neck, I have the neck. For a long time I didn't quite understand what this means, but in Old English, the neck is a reference to spirit. So Old English or Saxon, I'm not sure which one. I think it's Old English.
Same thing, Anglo-Saxon, Old English.
But whoever got it in this game, because this is a folk game, would run to the nearest well or waterway and pour water over it. And they were the winner of the contest in this harvest.
It was rough
game.
times. There wasn't a lot to do.
So, once again, these were turned into games and things like that, or folk customs and superstitions. But if you look at the sympathetic magic behind it, you're guarding the spirit of the harvest, and then later on, putting the water over it is kind of ensuring that it's going to be renewed.
Yeah, and Christianity keeps a lot of this. A good example of what Brian's talking about.
Yeah, this was probably done within a Christian.
Yeah, but a lot of what Brian's talking about, a really good example, is on Ash Wednesday in Catholic churches, when they put the ashes on your forehead. In many churches, those are the burned down palm fronds from last year's Palm Sunday. And so they've kept a lot of those alive, where you're carrying things on. It's a cycle, that cyclical magic, which is a big part of fertility magic, is understanding the cycles of nature, right? Which modern witchcraft celebrates the Sabbats based on a cyclical view of sort of agriculture, an agricultural magic. And I like that we've kept that alive. It ties us back to the earth.
And there's customs that we do today, like we just brought up the pumpkin. The pumpkin is a more modern incarnation of something older, like Levi was saying, turnips or other, symbols of the harvest. But once again, it's something that's brought into the home, and it's, filled with light. And as we know, religions love light. Religions like candles, they like Christmas lights, they like burning witches. I've stole this from a meme, by the way, or something. But anyway,
burning witches.
Funny, yes. Religions love lights. But bringing the light of the harvest into your home, and it's used as protection. I mean, we get that growing up as children in the United States and the UK, that this is a part of Halloween, and it's was supposed to protect you from bad spirits. Like, we're told that as children.
Yeah.
Not seriously, usually, but we're still told
Depends on the
that.
household you grow up in.
Depends on the household you grew up
weird.
in. Things do get weird. So, the Christmas tree is quite obviously a fertility symbol.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of people say that even though it's, people love to get real technical about when the first Christmas trees started becoming popular, brought in the home. I do believe it has older origins, decorating a tree with dried fruits and things like that to symbolize life coming back. And once again, bringing it in your home. There are a lot of customs about bringing evergreens into the home and decorating your house with.
I mean, they used to do that, for example, in the cult of Magna Mater. The symbol of Attis was a decorated pine log, for example, or a piece of evergreen that would be brought into the temple. So there is a history of it. I mean, true Christmas trees are quite modern, but I totally agree with Brian that the idea of bringing evergreens...
The origins of it.
Bringing evergreens into the house is much older because, it would be a memory. And also, I love to remind people...
I bet you it comes, and I know this is I bet you it comes from decorating trees outside.
But I also think
one
that,
point in time,
we've got when people are very, snotty and they're very particular about, well, it wasn't really a tree. I'm always like, listen, guys.
I always think that's an overstretch. It's like, I've heard
too much.
A lot of people say, like, well, technically speaking, the equinoxes and the solstices weren't, in Britain because they weren't celebrated by the Celts, but there's no proof that it was. It's such a stretch of this technical little, thing that they're going off of because there's so much we don't know. And then you're like, but there's all these stone circles in the UK that are clearly oriented to, they may not have been the Celts that built them, but, there's lots of evidence of it occurring in the UK. So that's off subject.
Yeah.
But once again, it's... these traditions sometimes people will try to be overly academic, I guess we say.
Because they're not understanding what we're saying.
Yes.
They're thinking that we're trying to Brian has said something that I love repeatedly on Covendom, which is witchcraft, as we understand and practice it, is not a reconstructionist faith.
No, not
it's
ours.
Just not. No. It's just not. We're not.
I think Llewellyn started that, to be honest with you.
Really? We're Celtic and we're going to do that, or we're Greek and we're going to do that.
Pick your culture and slap witchcraft or Wicca onto that.
Yep.
And that was your practice. But you had to have a culture. Quite frankly, it was a way to sell lots of books because
witchcraft.
There weren't that many traditions to actually write books about it. And most traditions weren't going to write books about their initiatory secrets. So it was just like, make up another way to talk about witchcraft. And we're not saying that that's, quite frankly, there's no such thing as, you'll hear people say, well, I'm a Scottish witch in America. It'll always be an American saying this. You'll never actually hear a Scottish person saying, I'm a Scottish witch. If they were, they're just saying they're actually Scottish, like if I were to say I'm an American witch. But that you won't ever see it because you're not a Scottish witch. You're American, and
you're from Sheboygan.
Yeah, and you're
a Sheboygan
related
witch
to Scottish people, but it's there's no other than books that have been written. There's no passed on tradition that's about a ethnic thing, and we totally steered off course.
It's fertility related.
The Maypole,
and he brings us back.
When I was really little, this is a really fun memory for me. We were living in a country town. I think it was called Reardon. I think this is where I was at the time, but we lived in the country a lot when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. So I was in school, and I don't remember the grade I was in, but I was in elementary school very early on. So this is a very early memory. I think it had to have been like first or second grade.
Like 1972, 73.
I wasn't born then. But anyway, we had a May Day festival.
Yeah, we had them too.
And all I remember about it is that there was a maypole. I strangely remember these teachers talking about how it used to be a pagan festival amongst each other. It was these three women. I remember the one leading it was very pretty, but she wasn't my teacher, and I never saw her again. And then they had us make paper flowers, and we were supposed to leave a basket of paper flowers on somebody's porch and knock and run away on the 1st of May. That's
witchcraft.
And I don't know if that's
some heathen children devil worship.
We did it, and it was something that ingrained in my mind. But yes, obviously the Maypole is a symbol of fertility, and dancing around it being inserted into the earth is a symbol of fertility.
Come on, we all know what we're saying. But I think there's other symbols of fertility magic and folk magic. I think a lot of times. Anything that has to do with, like, for example, there is a long history of magic and folk practices revolving around childbirth. I mean, where I'm from, and this is not an Appalachian thing, but it was just really popular when I grew up, but I know it's all over the country, and even if you're not from the South or from Appalachia, like, I know people, this was in their family for years. My grandmother was a devout United Baptist, but she would still hang a wedding ring on a piece of twine to make a pendulum to let it swing over a pregnant woman's stomach to see whether or not it was a boy or a girl. And there was also all kinds of folk customs when I was growing up about specific things you should or shouldn't do, or things that should be under your pillow or whatever if you wanted to get pregnant. So the concept of giving birth itself and fertility, that was a huge part of fertility magic and folk practice and always has been.
Yeah. And I think, one of the big points we took across from our last episode, which, I don't want to try to rehash too much of what we talked about there, was the fact that fertility is just as important as it is now. We are all... then as it is now. We may not be farmers, we may not be herders, we may not be hunters, but we rely on those methods. They still exist today, and if you eat anything, you're relying on it for your life force. So I suppose there's the gatherer, but that's still living off fertility, isn't it? So if you'd like to call in tonight with a question about tonight's episode or last week's episode, or on any topic of witchcraft or Alexandrian witchcraft, please call in 504-383-5266. Levi is going to tell me you can read it on the screen.
He is.
But you're supposed to say it. So anyway, it feels right to say it.
It feels right.
Yeah.
But yes, please call in. We love to answer questions on air. Well, I love to. It's like my favorite thing. I'm the one who wanted it to be a call-in show, so please don't prove me wrong.
We started the last episode of season 2 as a call-in, and Levi really enjoyed it. And we were trying to think of how to change things up. So I too have really enjoyed hearing from you, particularly the gentleman from Australia last week. I love Australian accents.
I know.
Yeah.
What's my favorite accent? Oh God, Western, like Wessex. Like I like that.
You think mine would be British, but actually I think that the Australian accent I prefer as far as like
Commonwealth accents?
Yes.
Out of the Commonwealth, I like South Africa.
It's like a British man with an edge,
With an edge, he says to me. But no. So I wanted to say, like, one of the things I wanted to say is, like, fertility is something, I love that we talk about this on the show. And I love that we had an entire show about the goddess. I love that, our monotheism in the craft. I love that we've had a lot of shows about this topic.
About the religion of witchcraft.
And the reason is this. We
haven't shown you how to light a candle yet.
And you're welcome for that, by the way. But the reason I love that we talk about this so much on the show is we do tend to live in this weird moment where a lot of people there's a sort of nihilism that's very popular right now. And so if you talk about, and it's a reaction, and I get it, to the love and light crowd of the 90s, and I totally understand that. And I have a problem with the love and light crowd too. I think it's a very,
He used to be one of them.
It's a very facile sort of way of interpreting the world.
He was never one.
I was never one of those. I was a cynical, miserable Catholic.
Even when he wore pink, he was bitter.
No, very bitter creature. Wait, let me find a good...
You done mess with the wrong witch.
Well, that's a new one.
So, like, I've always been a little...
You don't know the power of the dark side.
Oh, if we get one of those calls I talked about, that's the one we press.
Perfect, absolutely. Yes. But no, I've always been a little Sith. But I actually really like the balance of being a priest and saying to people, we are a priesthood of life. We are a priesthood of fertility. We're a priesthood of creation, co-creation, continuation, rebirth. That is a brave thing to say in the modern world that seems so cynical.
That's the priesthood of the goddess. There isn't another one.
In the West.
In the West.
And I think that, like, I think a big thing for me in my initiatory experience has been to really come to understand what that means. To say that I'm here to serve, right? Both the goddess, to serve life, to serve fertility, to have this concept of continuation. You know, if you notice, especially amongst millennials, there's a lot of cultural capital right now in joking about death, suicide, endings, not to get too heavy, but it's very popular. And to worship death and darkness and to be very, very bleak about the future. I think that it's nice to be in rebellion against that on some level. Oh, I do want to give it a shout out to Elohim, who said in the comments that he was here for the class on candle magic for dummies.
We would just be throwing candles at them. That's what we'd be doing.
Step one, light the candle.
Catch this in your mouth. Come on.
Step two, douse the person who asked in kerosene. But no, there's nothing wrong with candle magic.
What's happening here?
I do candle magic.
Feeling something.
What are you feeling?
A dog's tail.
Is it a human experience?
No,
like an emotion? You're not used to
I
those.
can pick him up with this setup.
Are you picking up a dog?
Yes, he's sitting here wagging his tail at me.
Speaking of living creatures, everybody.
Hello, everyone.
It's a poodle.
Lucy wanted to get on the show.
Her name's not Lucy. His
He
name.
thinks he is. Ricky, I want to be on the show too.
So we have a poodle, like legitimate homosexuals.
I have 3, but this one is the one who owns me. So he's got to do everything with me, and I'm feeling his tail wagging down there.
Yes, there is background music if you're just joining us. We're in New Orleans.
There's a block party outside my house, which just sprung up, happens all the time. So
we're okay with it.
But anyway, if you would like to call in with a question, Elohim, the number is 504-383-5266, and you can call in and ask me a question.
But no, fertility. Ask me a question about fertility.
Ask us all a question.
Ask me a question. Demandez-moi une question.
Now, in where you grew up, did they say ask?
No.
How did they say it?
Ask.
Didn't sound like that though, did it?
He wants me to...
He never will tell me. I know, because I've heard. Levi comes from a clicking language.
He does not.
Speaks so perfectly now.
I think I have quite a heavy Southern accent, actually.
I might not hear it anymore.
Yeah, because you live in the South. I think I have a heavy Southern accent.
I don't have a Southern accent, do I?
You don't. You sound like Madonna.
Oh,
we do have a call-in, so I'm going to take that before we get into this conversation. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hi, Levi. Hello, Mr. Cain.
Hello.
Hello, who is this?
Devil Brian.
This is, yes.
Devil Brian. Hi, Devil Brian.
Hello. I just had a quick question.
Ask away.
When it comes to fertility, would you say, let me rephrase it this way. With your tradition as a fertility tradition, would you say that also encompasses the fertility of your growth in your practice, if I'm using the correct terms?
Yes, Brian said this in the last show, but I'm glad you asked this question because it's really important. Is one of the things that we do with the concept of fertility in witchcraft is to transmute it into something larger than the fields. So we still care about being tied to the fields, but we also believe in the concept of fertility for the self. I am trying to create a fecund life. Like I want to manifest a better life. I want greater growth for myself.
Right, exactly, like a creation and birth of that.
Yes.
We want our magic to be fertile. You know, you can watch a ritualist. I've got one in my mind right now. You can watch a ritualist and see when there's no fertility behind their work. You can feel it.
It's sterile.
It translates. So sterile magic happens a lot in the purview of the public, and you can see it. And I know we all have. There's no one watching this who hasn't seen it. You can just tell when it's a mummer's play and it's sterile. It might be good in form and function or not, but you can still tell when there's no life behind it. And magic has to have life behind it.
And I agree. So there's a sterility that we're trying to avoid, and what we don't want is a form of magic that becomes so disconnected from the real world that it's no longer functional. You know, witchcraft is a fleshy religion, and so we're drawing down the gods into flesh. We're using them to we're co-creating with them to raise power, and all of that is in this very kind of touch and feel way. I mean, like, we're really bringing that power into the real world, and that's what we mean by fertile magic. Sterile magic is when you light a candle, you don't really know what you're doing, there's no one else there, you know, you've not really put any intent into it, and it's cold, clinical, and you memorize some words that don't mean anything to you in a language you don't speak, right? That's sterile. It's clinical, it's pointless, like, it's not gonna go anywhere.
Sometimes make it up as you go along if it's not coming from a true place of inspired madness, it is sterile. Especially when you have to sew other people's bits together. I think that something you'll find quite interesting, Brian, and you probably already know, is that when you look at the Christian myth of the devil, witchcraft myth of the devil, right? Not the Bible devil, but when you look at the devil within witchcraft lore, there are a lot of hints to fertility within that. You've got a sexuality. There's a lot of topics about having sex with the devil, or women having sex with the devil, or about
that's a really good point, actually.
The devil's member, and orgies harken back to the pagan rituals of fertility.
And his symbols. He's got a pitchfork. It's a farming tool.
It is a farming tool, and brooms are domestic, but a lot of times they were used in farming activities as well, or husbandry activities.
Not to cut you off, but it's such a good segue. In my book, in the Art Cosmic, I talk about in Saturn. It's very interesting when you look at grimoires that use Saturn planetary magic. Half of the magic spells that you'll find are about death and endings and curses and whatnot, because that is very Saturnine, and Saturn's very often associated with the devil. But the other half are agricultural, because he was the scythe bearer, Falsifer, the one who bears the sickle. There you go. So, he's...
I love it when you press that button.
Me too. But does that answer your question?
It sure does. And I had just one more quick question, and it's just a little bit off topic, if I may.
Ask away.
I think I know what it is.
Well, I'm just curious, because within my own personal practice, I use different symbols, as do most witches, and are in the form of what most know as altar patterns, if I'm saying that correctly.
Yeah.
Like the disc that sits at the central altar, yes. I do use a star symbol, and I was quite curious, because I've been doing this for a while, and I've been quite curious if there's something similar like it out there. But when the star is in an upright position, it's of a symbol of like spiritual ascension, and when it's in the downward position, it's more of like spirit descending, like we're bringing down spirit into our realm, if that makes sense. Is that something?
There is a reference to this in Eliphas Levi.
Yeah.
Eliphas Levi talks about the upright one being cosmic and the inverted one being matter being brought down into spirit. Modern Satanism uses the inverted as a symbol of materialism, as a philosophy.
Invert everything, right?
Yeah, but as a symbol of their philosophy, right? That they're a materialist philosophy, not a spiritualist philosophy. They don't really believe in any phenomenology. But there is a part of that in sort of historical occult grimoires. It's not that ancient in the sense of the five-pointed star. You don't see a lot of examples of that being considered demonic or evil or whatever historically.
No, and in our tradition, the pentagram, whether or not it's on a pentacle or not, does have different meanings depending on its position, and both are used.
Yeah, both are used.
Wow. Well, thank you. I mean, I don't know. I just always find it interesting when you're practicing, and if some of your practice may be like you're doing things unconsciously without knowing the source of it, and then you realize later on that, oh, this is actually a thing. So I'm going to do more research on that. I did not know that it was a thing of I never could say his name right. Eliphas Levi?
Eliphas Levi, or Eliphas Levi in French.
I always say Eliphas Levi nowadays.
Yeah. Eliphas Levi in English.
Yes, it's French, right?
Yeah.
You can be intuitive. Things can be channeled through, and we believe in reincarnation. So sometimes initiates retain knowledge even when they have not reinitiated in their new body.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Yeah.
God's will.
Yeah, to me, I'm just doing what makes sense.
We will neither confirm nor deny. We will neither confirm nor deny.
But yeah.
Of course.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you both so much as well. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Have a good evening.
You too. Take care, guys.
I love that. So that I have all these buttons now. So we do have a couple questions in the chat I wanted to answer. So Elohim, I'm sorry. So yeah, Elohim said, so if a coven is just men initiating men, for example, it could be considered non-fertile and not raising power in the way we do. There's not a balance. And we did address this in the last show, so I don't want to hammer it home. But yes, that is what we would say, is that it's one of the reasons we require male to female initiations, is because, there is a certain concept of fertility and that magic, a certain concept of power in that polarization.
Well, and it's also a very old occult principle, as above, so below. Most of you have heard that phrase before. We believe in it. So we believe that the flesh mirrors the spirit. And the spirit can mirror the flesh, right?
Yes.
We believe these things can happen. They don't always, obviously. Sometimes the flesh can be very sterile. Sometimes the spirit is sterile, and when that happens, it's not available, is it? So.
Very true. So, Christian wants me to put the questions on the screen. He's super into that.
Oh, I don't know how to do that.
I do. I'll drag them.
I don't know, Christian, if I'm going to make Levi do that sort of a chore. Do it on your own show.
No, maybe. We'll see. But I love how he's like, remember,
we'd rather people call in than have those questions anymore.
Ooh, yeah. I like this one. Wicked Witch said, what about the Baphomet? What do you think about the Baphomet? So, simple question. Christian doesn't need it on the screen necessarily. But
before I get on, since I'm rising Christian, I do have to thank Christian for doing all this work to get this show going. And apparently people think this looks really good. He spent 2 days setting this up. I thought when we did it from the house, it was going to be me and Levi at the table with a laptop.
Just like in a Diet Coke.
We got a call.
We do have a call, so before you do, remember Baphomet, but I'm going to take it. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hello.
Hi, who's this?
My name is Max. I called in.
Yeah, I remember you.
What was it? I think the last episode of season 2.
Yes.
I'm so excited to be watching live right now.
Good.
Because every time I've wanted to watch live, I've had to work because I work at Dairy Queen now. Anyways.
So now you can watch us live. So what's your question, Max?
I have one quick question and then 2 actual questions.
Okay.
First, the Art Cosmic, is that out yet, or is it coming out later?
No, that's in editing right now, but it will be coming out May or June of next year. I'm super excited.
We're very excited about it.
Super excited.
Okay, cool. I'm very excited, and I'm going to get it.
Hasn't been
as
anything like it since Patricia Crowther wrote about astrology.
I'm trying.
Oh, I love Patricia.
I do.
Okay. This is a really weird question. I don't know why this came to mind, but it did. Hear me out. So, as witches, you don't initiate children because nudity, that's illegal.
Yeah.
But if for whatever reason there was a coven of a bunch of prepubescent children, would that still be able to function if they haven't gone through puberty and don't have that fertility aspect?
Okay, couple of things. One of the things is it's kind of a moot point to begin with, because it's not just about the legality of drinking or nudity. That's the problem.
Sex.
Or all the ritualistic, sin. It's not the only issue. The only issue is also a question of maturity. So, I mean, for example, in some European countries, you can drink at 16, so it wouldn't be a big deal anyway.
However, the sacred orgy might be an issue.
Brian, really? We're not doing this. We're not doing this.
Don't police me.
I'm going to police you when it's about children.
He couldn't if he tried. That's my whole point as to why they wouldn't be allowed.
But so, Max, the big thing
we don't want children in the sacred orgy.
It wouldn't just be about sort of legalities and whatnot. It's also a question of we are a priesthood. And so, for example, there are no childhood priests in the Catholic faith either. There are no childhood rabbis. It takes a certain level of maturity and study for priesthood. So that's part of the answer. The other thing I'll say is the legalities do kind of matter, because the freedom of a witchcraft circle cannot be hindered in any way, or it's problematic. And so we wouldn't want to create a situation where we were creating discomfort in the circle.
I'm going to take it to a kind of a different place, but the same idea here. So, one, from what Levi's saying is true. The Witchcraft Society is secret. So in good practice, initiates could ideally have a completely secret coven with all its activities being secret. It's the right of the leaders to even demand that be so.
Yep.
If they do not want to be known, they can demand that you're not known. They can tell you cannot be publicizing it, and if you do, they're not going to work with you, etc., etc. So that could all happen. So in theory, I suppose one could do whatever one wanted in such a situation. Obviously, Levi and I are in a situation to where we're a part of a global tradition. We're very plugged in. We're a bit in the light. So, that would be extremely problematic for us. But here's the other thing to back up what Levi said. I used to think that my rule for initiation would be like 18 or 19 if I was going to do it, right? And then I thought, well, maybe 21 because of the wine, right?
Yeah.
So these are the thoughts that I had occurring for myself, and I settled on 21 just to be safe because we were in the limelight. But through experience, I actually, for my coven and for my working, would be hesitant to initiate anyone under the age of 25. And I know that sounds extremely discouraging if you're not that age yet. But it is because you're not really of a mature mind beforehand. People go through a lot of change between their 20s to 25.
Yes, they do.
It's also the time period mental illness sets in. Like schizophrenics usually become schizophrenic during that time period. Bipolar appears. There's just so much going on. And in our age today, people are even less mature than they were before because they're marrying later, they're getting responsibilities later. We're raised in a society where everything's on Facebook and Instagram and everyone can be famous. So there's a lot of delusion going on, and Levi's a teacher. He can attest to the fact that your generation is maturing less rapidly than ours.
It's not a bad thing. It's just different.
No, not entirely.
No.
But when it's coming to the sort of idea of like being a priest, Catholic or witch or otherwise, we don't want to waste our time, and having done so myself and having given things that I know will be disrespected continuously, I think that I'm hesitant to make that mistake again. So here's the third thing, though, you brought up. This is a fertility religion, and a lot of what we do is emphasized through the symbology of sex.
Yeah.
And I do believe that one must have gone through puberty to be a witch. I do believe that you must be a fully realized sexual entity to be able to perform witchcraft correctly.
Yes.
I do not think a child or a prepubescent entity would fit into the craft that I practice. So I think hormones, fully developed consciousness of them, are definitely essential. In fact, it was a show called Salem, which I'm not advocating the show for some reasons, because it's kind of dark and historically inaccurate, but it had a phrase in there that I actually really agree with. To work magic, one must be aroused. I really think that has a profound, statement behind it that really draws meaning from my craft. So my answer to you would be no. First of all, from my, children can't really be witches.
No.
Children can be great magicians.
Yes.
They can be extremely magical, and they often lose it later in life.
They can be very devout, too,
Yes.
to the gods.
So, in a different society, I think children could be reared more towards the craft, but I do think you have to be fully realized sexual adult to be initiated into witchcraft and to practice our rituals.
Yeah. Does that answer that part?
Yeah, I think it was. I have no idea where that came from. It was crossing my mind, and I'm like, I want to ask about that.
Yeah.
But I think it was about how children make the best magicians. But of course, magic and witchcraft are not the
not
same.
inhibited by doubts, and they have an extremely free imagination.
I mean, this is in a lot of the grimoires. There's a lot of grimoire traditions where they will, like the oracles, for example, will have to be done through a child. You'll have to find a young child to speak for the gods or whatever. This is a thing, right? Historically. But you're right, magic and initiatory witchcraft are not the same thing. So you can practice magic quite well, but to be initiated to service to the gods, you would have to be an adult.
Now, as far as what I once suggested to you, it's obviously not our craft to just create a group. We're not really advocates of make it up as you go along, or I don't think the world needs any more traditions. I quite frankly, and this is probably not going to be a popular statement, I think anyone who starts a tradition now is a jackass. That's basically what I think, because I think that that era is over, and it's not going to work anyway. You're starting a coven. Your coven might have its own things, fine. But there aren't going to be any more traditions, probably. Not ones that actually because it's not a tradition till it's carried on by many, many people for generations. It's not a tradition till then. It's been done already. That's my opinion. Could be wrong. Somebody could prove me wrong. But I still think that you could find like-minded people, because you're young, of your age, and you guys can work it out and have your own kind of circle and express yourself toward the gods. I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Nope, not in any way.
Just be mindful that you might experiment, change your mind, be careful what you do, read really good books, but I don't think there's anything wrong with you worshiping our gods and embracing the realms of magic and trying to, have that experience now. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I did it. No one was going to stop me. So, but I wasn't able to be initiated in my first craft until I was 19 years old, because she wouldn't start working with me till I was 18, and that was her rule, right? So, yeah.
Is that good, Max?
And I met her when I was 17. So,
Yeah.
clarify.
And on the subject of initiation, I am 17 now, so I gained one more year. But I don't even know how long I've been practicing witchcraft, worshiping the goddess now, but it's been a few years, and I'm still a seeker, so I still have a few more years before I can be initiated. But my mother's not in the house right now, so I can say this. My mother is pretty narcissistic and emotionally abusive, and my sister, she keeps telling me, like, you don't belong here, you need to get out. And, like, we went to New Orleans. That was really the only place I've ever felt like I fit in, because I'm just weird. I've never really had a whole lot of friends. But, like, New Orleans was where I fit in. And even if I'm, like, not an initiate in your coven, I would love to be. So if I can impress you enough and you would initiate me, I would love that. But I can't remember what my actual question there was. What are you looking for in an initiate for your coven specifically, aside from being older?
Well, it's Brian's coven, so I'm gonna let him have the final word. But I'll say something.
You go first.
Very quick, right?
Because what am I looking for?
What is Brian looking for? Devotion and work, and also power. That's a big thing in the Alexandrian craft. Is this concept of I've met initiates from all over the world. Power. Yeah, exactly. You know Maxine's sayings. I've met initiates from all over the world. Portugal, England, America, Brazil. There is a certain smell, as we might say. They smell a certain way, right? Like there's a force, there's a power, there's a click,
It's like sulfur and nagchampa.
It is. It's a weird odor. But my point
frankincense, maybe frankincense.
There's an electric jolt, and I remember Christian talking about this one time, and I'm not spilling any secrets because he said this on air in his interview, where he said even people he didn't like necessarily in the tradition that he had met at events or whatever had this weird electric pulse or whatever. So that is honestly, we look for people who we know are our people, if that makes sense. We look for people, that was a big thing that our elders used to say historically, where they would be like, I look for the people who I know were witches in a past life. You know what I mean? Or, that was a part of it, right?
I think it's a really safe gauge, because my experience being an initiator for many years, I've almost always gotten it right, but I have gotten it wrong. That's the experience.
Yes.
And I think that when I have gotten it wrong, I think that they were firstborns. I don't think that I don't think they'd been here before. And so it was wrong for me, but they'll probably come back in another life and do it again. It's a part of the evolution of their soul. But I think, for selfish reasons, I do prefer somebody who's already sort of established.
Yeah.
Where I am now, I want to train the trainer. I want to teach the teacher. I don't, that's where I am now in my place in the craft. I don't want to flatter egos or introduce people to a religion as much as I want to foster the right talent. Whereas Levi's probably going to, be holding tent revivals.
Oh, when my coven will be missionary in its glory. We'll just out be spreading the glories of the goddess. But no, Max, that's the biggest thing. It's like you've got to keep the faith. You're young. No, Probably not going to get initiated.
If you're still like this when you're 21, you may be an exception to the 25 rule. But, usually speaking, I think that I would stick to that 25 rule.
Perseverance matters, okay?
If somebody was going that long, I probably would think, however, yeah, the ego of youth is a thing too, and we never believe it. And this is a part of fertility. There's a great fertile power with younger people, and it's something that I, think the craft definitely can tap into, but there's a cost, right? So the ego of youth is that we all think we're fantastic.
Yes.
We probably do now too. But when you're young, you're just like,
You're going to think that till you're dead,
I'm
Brian.
the prettiest thing, I'm the smartest thing, there's something special about me, and when you put that into the occult world, it can quickly turn into very dangerous delusion. And I'm really glad that in my younger years, I didn't have the internet that we have today.
Same.
I was shielded from that, so I didn't have to deal with that. I dealt with older people who slapped me down when I got too crazy, and I didn't have anyone to verify. If a young, 19-year-old Brian on the internet now, I'd have all these stupid young people and stupid old people flattering me left and right, and I'd believe it was real.
Yeah.
That's the natural state of things that we're in now, and they're also geared to look for that flattery. So I think it's more problematic now than it might have been in the past. I do know, Maxine was initiated when she was 19. I was first initiated when I was 19, but we were a different breed. We didn't have the internet. We only had our elders to guide us. We didn't have this fame game going on.
But I would say this. I would say perseverance is, again, what matters. So if you still feel this way in a couple years, that'll be the proof in the pudding. If it's irritating or off-putting or things kind of push you away or you find an easier route and you take that, then that will be the lesson. Does that make sense?
And you might change your mind in 2 years from now.
You could be an evangelical Christian.
You might want to be a Buddhist.
Or a Buddhist, like Lisa Simpson. But I hope that answered everything. And again, keep the faith.
Yes, it does. Thank you
Good.
so much.
Have a good evening.
You too.
So, we did have some questions in chat. Lots of questions. It's been a great show, guys. Thank you so much for all your questions, call-ins.
It's early still.
I know, and we've had so many questions. Elohim had a really good one that I did want to hit on. He said, do you promote rituals
the Baphomet
inside...
first.
Well, we can do the Baphomet
We'll forget
one.
it otherwise. What was the question about the Baphomet?
How do you feel about the Baphomet?
Oh, well, that was a symbol that was created or given to us by Elvis Levi, right? And it's become a very powerful symbol for many traditions, and it's become, a staple of the tarot. Not sure which came first, Elvis Levi or the Tarot Devil. I'm not really sure.
The Tarot Devil's older, but it's not the Baphomet image until
But it started shifting into the Baphomet image. So, to me personally, I think it's an extremely wonderful imagery. Most people will say it's an occult image. It is occult ideas, not necessarily an entity. My favorite history or pseudo-history of Baphomet is that Greek word Baphometus, might not be saying it right, means baptized by wisdom. And, that's one of the possible origins for the word Baphomet. Other people make it a garbled version of Muhammad.
That's kind of what I think.
Yeah. But the reason I don't buy that one is because there's nothing about the image that to me speaks of Muslim religion.
But there's a reason behind it, I'll tell you.
I get it. I've heard it. I've obviously heard it. But, I like the Greek baptized by wisdom better. So whether that's fantasy or not. All right. We have a call?
We do have a call.
So I like it.
I love it too. I love the Baphomet image. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hi, I have a question.
Sure, what's your name?
Angel,
Hi, Angel. What's your question?
what made you decide the craft and why?
Okay. Like instead of another path or religion?
Yes. I believe that we're all born witches, but what made you decide that was...
Okay, no, I love that question. I chose the craft because I don't believe we're born witches.
Okay.
I believe I had to be made one. I believe people are born magical, but I believe that to humble myself enough to undergo the rites of initiation was necessary to take on priesthood. I'll tell you this, Angel, I could give you a really long, and I've talked about this on Covendom before, so I don't want to, like convoluted answer about the goddess and the reality of God coming into my life. And it's a very meaningful story to me, but I'm going to give you a much simpler one. I chose the craft because it worked. Because I had spent almost my entire life on my knees in service to the Catholic Church. It was my desire for many, many years to be a Dominican priest, and God never showed up for me. I had tried multiple other paths, multiple other systems, different forms of spirituality, both within Catholicism and then eventually, thank God, outside of it. When I started working with the gods of witchcraft, they showed up. And so I chose...
Well, Catholicism and witchcraft have a lot of similarities. I mean, Catholicism shows a lot from witchcraft, so...
Oh,
and
100%.
they have a lot of differences.
Yeah, they do.
More differences than similarities. So to answer the question from my perspective...
is this Brian?
This is Brian. Hi, Angel. I think you're my sort of pseudo-relative, Angel.
Yes.
Yes. This is Christian's niece.
Oh, hello.
I thought it was you, darling. Like Levi, I also don't believe that we're born witches. I think some people are reborn witches, but I do believe that initiation has always been a part of the true craft. Now, I realize that living in, Salem or in this broader world, that conversation becomes a lot more complex, and we've had it before, so I'm not going to do it now. Obviously I would with you, but it's not really the subject of the show. So I would say that the two things that probably brought me to witchcraft are the religious side was the worship of the goddess, and then I was always extremely interested in magic and the occult, and so fusing those two things together, well, that's craft. Oh, you want to worship a goddess and practice magic. Plus I see magic as a religious experience. I don't see it as just a mechanic or anything like that. I see it as part of my religious experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
If that answers
Thank you.
the
I was
question.
just curious. It did answer my question.
Good.
I was watching the live, and I was very curious as to why. So.
Well, I'm very
Good
happy
question.
to answer.
Thank you for the question.
Thank you
Very
for
good.
calling. Thank you for asking.
No problem.
Awesome. Well, bye. I love our callings.
Angel probably was a witch in the past life.
Could be.
I've
I
met
do
her.
believe, I need to clarify that. I do believe there's the concept of being born into something through reincarnation, rebirth, carrying the spirit or egregore of something.
Well-
but I still am just so pro-initiation, guys. Like, regardless of what you want to be.
Here's
whether
the
it's
thing. I
any
can tell you
tradition.
this right now. So, and I'm not putting this on Angel because I don't actually know where she's from. But the Salem community has its own sort of like nucleus that's kind of been built up the years. Like living there is not like living anywhere else.
I see that.
And so there are certain ideas that come up, and I don't think this is just a Salem idea, but there's this sort of thing there that just like, I don't need anyone to tell me what to do. This is in me. This is my, and I think this goes beyond, and I get it. This is my inner power.
Yes.
I don't need anyone to give this to me. It's mine. And in a sense, that is a true, really true thing that we believe in the occult, in our craft. Like, we do believe people have an inner power in them that is their own, that cannot be bestowed upon them by other human beings. However, to us, that's not witchcraft. It doesn't fit the definition of our craft or the historical narrative of how modern craft came into being. Modern craft came into being as an initiatory cult. That just happens to be the line of facts. Some people chose to begin practicing it differently, but it doesn't really change the fact that that was the narrative. We follow that narrative. Initiation is very important. However, I've never met an initiate that doesn't believe that for some, initiation was a matter of coming home.
Yes.
I used this narrative very recently, kind of off topic, I know, that, there's this whole story about when Jesus, who's supposed to be the Son of God, goes before John the Baptist, who's supposed to be a prophet of God. And John the Baptist somehow recognizes that this is the Messiah, like that this person is the Son of God. And John the Baptist, he's initiating people, he's baptizing people. That's a Christian initiation. And it used to be more of an initiation back in the day. They had this thing about light and all that stuff. But he says, "What? No, why are you coming to me to do this?"
Yeah.
Basically.
I'm not worthy to, like, your sandal strap.
And Jesus says, I have to fulfill the law of man. If your ego is so great that you think that you don't have to do the thing that's been going on longer than your grandparents were probably alive, then that's your ego, right? So you have to sort of suss it out. In one sense, because of Christianity, we want to embrace that rebellious side of witchcraft and that personal power. Like, we get it. Like, we're you on some level. The difference is also we chose to get initiated. Guess what? Hadrian, the Emperor of Rome, chose to get initiated. So did a lot of other great kings and queens and extremely powerful people. Yeah. We've got no proof that Cleopatra got initiated into anything, but guess what? She did. There's no doubt about it in my mind that she did. Because it was a part of the systems that she was working with, and she was embracing those systems. So those ancient people, no matter how great they were, saw that magical spell. Initiation is a magical spell between you and the gods. However, it is within the vacuum of the law of man, because you're talking about things that are community-based and require other people. Yep. And let's be honest, if everyone just believed everything everyone else said and thought and felt about magic and spirituality, where would we be? You cannot trust the experience of other people.
Not entirely.
You can trust the experience to some extent of a community of people, to some extent.
Yeah. So Elohim asked one to bring it back to sexuality and fertility is, do you approve or promote rituals that are just for one sex? And I don't think he's asking about same-sex initiation, because we've already talked about that. What he's asking, he says, is for like one man or one woman can work something on their own. They don't need the opposite gender.
I don't think that's what he's asking.
He says, yeah.
Do you approve
rituals
or promote
able for
rituals inside of the tradition, just able for one sex? That's not, unless it's an interpretation thing. Rituals for... Okay, so let me clarify. Levi can answer how he thinks you're asking it, but... So within Alexandrian craft, there are no there are very few same-sex rituals. They do exist, but not in the not exclusive. So there are rituals that exist where the men or the women might do something apart, but then they're going to come together at that same time period. So there's no ritual where it's like all just women or all just men. A solitary ritual, like if it's just like you yourself, I mean, it's not really a thing. I'm not saying there aren't any that exist, but it's not really a thing. Obviously, we do practice our own magics, and we're fine with that. And but do we focus on that a lot? Not in our craft. Alexandrians are also occultists, so we might teach planetary magic or angelics or Kabbalah, and those things are often promoted to be doing your own magics on your own, right?
Yep.
But our craft is always focused on coming together. So there's perhaps some rituals where the women and men might temporarily be separated, but they're going to come together. So my answer to that is no, based on how I'm interpreting the question.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. So there are rituals where there might be somebody alone, but I'm going to say this. I think there's an immense power in this concept that, there are certain things in our religion that you absolutely cannot do without the opposite sex.
Like anything real, honestly.
Honestly. Yeah. And I love that, because what it is it's a constant reminder.
We can be alone.
Oh, of course.
It was somebody who said, somebody brought this up, they did a show about how a witch's natural state is being alone. I hated it, but I understood what it meant. A human being's natural state is being alone. So, in a sense, we're all going to be alone sometimes. I don't think it's the natural state of a witch. I think it's the natural state of a human being. But
I might not even agree with that.
Yeah. The old witchcraft thing is, and I'm sort of being a bit naughty, but ye may not be a witch alone. And for a long time, I didn't quite really I didn't get what that meant for a long time. I always thought it was a persecution thing. Now I read into it a lot differently than I used to. Witchcraft, like voodoo, is a community experience. Real witchcraft. And even if you look into the church trials, the real big stuff, the real big myths were about people being in this secret, separated community, forbidden community.
The good society, the good people.
You had your examples of, Molly made a puppet, but,
It was really a concept of the other, right? Witchcraft thrives on the other, and I love that magically. I love that there are things that...
And we're talking about fertility.
Exactly.
To date, you still need the other. Even if you're going to have a test tube baby, that thing that's getting inserted came from another person.
And the thing is the deeper truth there is this. It's an ego check. It's 100% an ego check. You're never going to be that mad lunatic Cthulhu calling magician because you can't be.
No.
The gods aren't going to show up for you. They're going to show up for a sacred union, right? So it's this constant need of other. And there's a beauty to that really teaches you humility, reverence, power, authority, all these things. It teaches you so very much, right?
And quite frankly, the only magicians, when I look historically, the magicians who were really successful and kept it together till the end usually had a really strong partnership. McGregor Mathers and his wife, can't think of her name ever, they had a strong relationship and worked together till the end, and they really, there was polarity going on in their magic and in their work. And I'm a big fan because most people don't realize it, but their later work was that they had gotten this idea that the real religion of the future was going to be the religion of the goddess Isis. This is their after Golden Dawn work. And they actually developed these Isis rituals that were done in public. One of them was a belly dance that went through all of the elements that she would do. And unfortunately, we don't have any information of what that actually looked like.
Yeah.
But she, or how she created it. But it was this beautiful ritual. They did it publicly twice. But they were convinced, and I find it really interesting that this work is going on right before modern witchcraft comes into the forefront.
Yep, which is the cult of the goddess.
Realized, they were receiving some information, I think. Point is, McGregor Mathers may not have been perfect, but we don't, as far as I know, he didn't end his life in a hostel on heroin. I don't really know how he ended his life, but,
and yes,
Dion Fortune. I don't know what her love life was, but she did well. And she always was working that sort of polarity about. These people had this sort of they had the cosmic consciousness as an initiate.
Yes, they did.
And you'll find that most initiatory traditions, even the more misogynistic ones, offer some sort of balance if you really get into it.
They do.
Yeah.
And people are saying something in the chat I want to address. A lot of people are talking about, well, you're never alone if you walk with the gods, you're never alone if you walk with spirit, your ancestors, etc. I agree to an extent. I will push back just to touch on one thing, which is this. Mankind's natural state is not to be alone. It's actually, the more alone you are, and it's fine to be a little bit of an introvert or hermit. I'm not talking about that if that's what you think I'm addressing. I'm talking about real loneliness, sheer being cut off from a community. I work with a lot of social workers and therapists because of what I do in my mundane life, and I will tell you this. The number one thing they fight against with their clients is isolation, because it's what leads to the really tragic endings. That's where things go really awry. We were not meant to be alone. And I think if the craft has anything to teach the modern world...
I still look at this one.
I know. It's that you have to have the other. There is something you don't have that is in something that's not you, and you will figure that out, and in that union is a beauty, and it has a lot to teach us about what it is to be human in this world. Separation, isolation, individualization. This is my gripe sometimes with magicians, is there's this egocentric, obsessive singularity to their practice that I find off-putting sometimes. And I don't care what demons they're calling, or spirits, or gods, or angels, or whatever. It's always so utterly singular. I have had deep spiritual issues this year because of being cut off a little bit from our practice on some level. And if anything, it's actually made me love my practice more, not dislike it. It's made me realize how precious it really is, right?
Well, and we've been much more proactive than most groups because we started meeting again in June. So we have kept up some meetings, but there are certain things we're not doing.
Exactly.
Like initiations right now. Like we were saying earlier, and this is an occult concept that I completely embrace and that our craft completely embraces, but it's not really a craft concept. It's old. It's very old. As above, so below. So we don't tend to go on to weird spiritual notions like you're never alone, as long as the gods are. It sounds beautiful. But if you're alone in the flesh, you are alone in the spirit. Right? The gods are not some untangible, invisible bestie friend, Well, hi, goddess. How are you today? The goddess is all things. And she is a goddess consciousness. She's not just someone sitting up on a cloud waiting to take my phone call. She is a part of matter. She's a part of flesh. She is the moon. She is the wave. She is the earth.
Yes.
And she is all things that walketh upon the earth. So that is more how we think in our craft. So here's what I will say. There are times when witches are forced to be alone.
Yes.
And, to support your statement, the Force is a powerful ally, However, that Jedi would be drawn to make a connection. If I was alone, I believe that force within me, that spirit within me, the gods, would be drawing me to make a connection. I would be drawn to the right students, which is another form of fertilization. Initiation is a form of fertilization. It's a propagation, right? So sometimes it starts with the teacher and the student, and that's your first polarity, which is why in the craft, it's male to female.
Okay. We have an excellent question that I want to ask because it's a logistics
Do I sound
question.
like a crazy person?
No, I agree with everything you said. Facebook user, it doesn't give a name on here, so it says, what is your stance on a coven that doesn't have the opposite sex? For example, if a high priest starts a coven but does not have any initiates, and their first student who comes along and asks to be initiated is a man, what do you do?
Well, in our craft, you couldn't do anything.
Yeah.
So in our craft, it's not permissible ever. So there's no time when you can do that in our craft. So what would generally be done in such a case is that you would know that your students need to be female, and that would be the only thing on your mind, right? You wouldn't even be going there. I suppose if you met someone exceptional, you'd have to explain to them, I am interested in doing this. I am a third degree of this tradition, and once I get someone going. It also depends on what line you're in, quite frankly. So within the Alexandrian tradition and some Gardnerian lines, a priest can start a coven, whereas some Gardnerian lines don't allow that to happen unless there's a working partnership. It's just lineage thing that people choose to follow. I can definitely see the benefit of being in a working partnership to start a coven, because then that's never a problem.
Yes.
Right? But if you find yourself in a situation to where you don't have a working partner, then you can only work with opposite sex students. Now in our craft, if you have one opposite sex student, you could use that person for the initiation, because we'll allow a first degree under the right circumstances, under your guidance, to initiate a new person as part of their training. It's totally fine. A witch is a witch is a witch. So, but some lines aren't like that. So, but no, we don't ever do same-sex initiations.
Would you approve of, for example, let's say a high priest had started a coven and a male student comes, would you think it would be appropriate if that high priest reached out to female high priesthood that he knew and was on good terms with to initiate that male student?
Well, then he should be going to them.
That's what I mean, like sending them to another coven.
Well, that's what I would do.
Like you'd
absolutely.
be
if it was optional. For instance, let's say me and Levi are both running covens, and for whatever reasons, Levi's just, let's say he's trying to start a coven, right? And he finds this great priest. He should send it to our coven.
Yeah.
And if that guy decides to go back over later or whatever, that'd be a discussion we would have. But in some areas, in most areas, there aren't like a whole bunch of covens. So
yeah, it's usually, and it's going to be a problem. And
but here's what I'm going to tell you from my experience. In true craft, my craft, sounds really arrogant, doesn't it? In the craft that I practice, I've never had that occur. When I have been in situations, for instance, when I wanted to start this coven here in New Orleans, I did not, I was initiated, but I did not have a priestess here with me. I only had women and me gravitating together. I didn't meet any men. And it wasn't until the first two priestesses were initiated that all of a sudden any men came along at all.
It kind of works
and
out.
Then they came in droves. But, it's...
The men folk.
It started out with just priestesses. And I've always heard that to be the case. It seems the magic will find a way.
Agreed.
If it's really power and it's really magic, it's really meant to be, it will not be an obstacle. If you're a priest and you cannot get priestesses to come to you, it's because you're infertile in some level or you're not coming from the right place. Quite frankly, if you're considering doing same sex, you're so far removed from my craft. And that's not meant to be an insult. I'm saying it just wouldn't enter into our brains.
So, Wicked Witch said you cannot start a coven by yourself then? No, to clarify what he's saying, you can. What he said
In some lines. I can, he can.
Yes, in our line you can.
In Alexandrian witchcraft,
You just cannot do a same-sex initiation.
any third degree can start their own coven. So a first degree cannot start a coven, second degree cannot start a coven. And this is true in Gardnerian as well.
Yes.
However, some lines allow for singular leaders to start a coven, and some lines expect you to have already a working partnership. It depends on the line. Predominantly in true Alexandrian craft, well, in my opinion, in the true original craft, a singular leader is fine, but you do have to only work with opposite sex students.
Yes.
But if you can start it with, a partner, then it's never a problem, because whether a man or a woman comes to you, somebody's available.
Somebody's there.
And that is always the goal. It is never the goal within Alexandrian or Gardnerian craft to keep a single sex leader. That may be how you start or how you end up because somebody dies. If you've got this great high priest and high priestess and somebody dies and there's no one to take the place of that person, you're not going to just elevate somebody because you have to have a rule. You're going to wait until the right person comes along. So it can and has been done by singular leaders on many occasions. However, there are some lines that really try to promote the opposite. But the opposite is always the goal. So it's always the goal to eventually have a high priest and a high priestess working together.
100%. And, like Brian said, I think the magic finds a way. I think if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. And
but
it works itself out.
Whether people like it or not, we don't really, within Alexandrian Gardnerian craft, same-sex initiation is never going to be considered valid. It has happened, but it's never really floated the boat of being accepted as valid.
No.
Some people might, but
it would cut you off from the community.
Well, I wouldn't consider it valid because it removes itself from the practice to an extent to where it's not the practice anymore by any means whatsoever.
Yeah.
And that's coming from gay men. We're not,
No, yeah, it's
honestly,
not.
we're all about the same sex in certain areas, just not in our witchcraft.
Valid. Valid. Not in.
We're allowed to have same sex in our witchcraft, so it's great.
Not in church.
Yeah. If you're trying to make a baby, magical or otherwise, it only works certain ways.
Not in church, people. I'm kidding, though. So we did have I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any because I remember we had a call and there was quite a few.
Got a little
thank you for all the comments, guys. Yes, Christian, I know I can put it on the screen, and for a long comment like that, I should have. I shall remember. We have this really cool thing where we can put your questions on the screen so that if you're watching, you can kind of see what they asked and see what we're talking about.
So how does my hair look to you guys?
Brian, are we doing this?
Sparkly.
Are we doing this?
It doesn't look like it did earlier, but we do have weird outlines. Oh, Elohim said it was perfect. Elohim, why haven't you called in? Don't you like us anymore? Anyway.
So MJ says, for example, you could make the argument that once somebody does a same-sex initiation, it ceases to be craft. In my opinion, yes, that is true.
Here's the whole thing. When you're talking about the subject of witchcraft or Wicca, you've got this two umbrella terms that's really, as you've all heard me say, Old English, New English, same word.
It's the hill he's going to die on.
But, it's this huge thing. And most people coming out to now don't really understand that it is an already fully established mystery tradition, occult order, cult, priesthood that's been going on for quite some time with a lot of established things in living communities. They just don't get it because that's not how it was introduced to them. And it's not predominantly what's in most of the books or on most of the social media. That's why we do Covendom. Because we're one of two people that I know of on social media who even come from a BTW background.
I will say this. Something that I've noticed is a lot of people who come to me, because I do work at Hex one day a week.
Thorn Mooney being the other one.
I love Thorn.
She's almost as pretty as I am.
I love Thorn.
Prettier than Levi.
Definitely. 100%. 100%.
She's prettier than both of us.
I love Thorn.
Damn you, Thorn.
So
Anyway.
I will say something that I never thought of until I did the show. Working at Hex, I do get, because I work there one day a week as a reader, I do get people who come in and say, Coven Witchcraft's not for me. I was in a Coven. And I started thinking, my God, how many covens are there in America that every pagan in America has been in a Coven? And then I realized that's not what they mean.
No.
What they mean is I went to the park once at a public meetup that called itself a Coven. I never went again. I was in a Coven. No, you were not. And also, you're not understanding group dynamics. Or I was in a reading group and they call it a Coven. You know what I mean? Like a Coven is a very tight-knit, magically working, functioning community. It is not a large group of people who meet occasionally
I'm going there,
for
Levi.
things. No.
So, Facebook user.
Not yet.
You're not done yet.
I'm going to keep talking till 9 o'clock. But
You're
anyway,
afraid of the same
that's
old
my
boring conversation.
answer it's
So,
different.
Facebook users asking, where would transgendered and/or non-binary people fall into that? Would you go off their biological sex or the gender identity? I'm sorry if this has already been addressed. Okay, so number one, it has already been addressed. So here's the thing. No time, it's been addressed. I'm not being mean to you, but it is the most repetitive, boring question that comes up in like every conversation of witchcraft on social media. And so here's the answer. At no time ever do I discuss with an initiate or an outsider what's going to go on during their initiation. That's not how an initiation works. So they would be initiated the way their coven found suitable for them to be initiated, and they wouldn't know until they were in the initiation. So it's not a negotiable thing, initiation, so they don't get to decide. And it is autonomous, so it's up to every coven leader, I suppose, how they choose to navigate that. There's nothing within craft that excludes any human being. However, there are craft rules. And there is a fact that there is the identity of being a priest or a priestess. There is no identity of being neither a priest or priestess. So I don't think this system would fit someone who didn't identify with being male or female, or a priest or a priestess, or whatever you want to call it. It wouldn't work for them because there's no other role. There are plenty of other magical systems that do have other roles. Doesn't occur with us. But that's basically the end of it. Why am I hearing me talking again? Oh, is it your phone?
It was.
Make it stop.
I'm going to.
Please don't
I
do
did.
that. So, quite frankly, yes, it's up to each coven. It's not a subject I'm shy of. I will tell you this, in all my years, I ran one coven for 25 years. I've been running this coven in New Orleans since 2014. And I've really never encountered that. I get contacted by people about it all the time, usually trolls, usually people just wanting to get me to say the unpolitically correct thing. But it's not anything. Levi, when you were initiated, did we say, how do you want to be initiated and by whom do you want to be initiated?
No, we did not.
And did you know who was going to initiate you until you were initiated?
No.
Same. We don't, it's not a discussion that happens. It's certainly not one we're going to have in public. So it's not up to them. They would be given, obviously, certain guidelines, and we would have conversations amongst ourselves. It's a very personal thing. But what I can say, that just happens to be fact, is that there obviously are roles of priestesses and priests within the craft.
Yes.
And, I don't think someone who does identify with neither can work in that system. Doesn't mean I have a problem with them or that they can't find a system, but it's already an established system that did not, I don't think they were thinking about this kind of thing. I don't think it was in the consciousness. It was going off of, very obvious fertility-oriented nature things. I don't think gay people were really in the equation. However, as I said, there's nothing in the craft that actually states that any kind of human being is excluded. However, you will be excluded if you don't fit a good fit for the priesthood, or you don't fit the good fit for the coven. And that's going to be you're going to be excluded for that reason, based on whatever that reason might be. If you've got a coven that hikes out every, day 3 miles into the woods, and that's where they do their circles at midnight, they're not going to take you if you're in a wheelchair. Not because the craft has anything against anyone in a wheelchair, not because there's any rules against someone in a wheelchair, but because it wouldn't work for that group. However, there's certain obvious things like priest or priestess. You would, I suppose some traditions may develop where you could identify as both, but that doesn't work in our craft because it would take away the other. Once you could be both, you are really just self-serving. It's your own identity. It becomes that sort of like, well, they're both in me anyway. Well, they're both in everything anyway. We already know that. But once again, as above, so below, the flesh matters to us.
Very much so.
It may not be politically correct, but it is based on nature and reality. So hopefully that clarifies the question.
I want to hit on it because it's come up, and I try to avoid this conversation because I hate this conversation
it comes
immensely.
Up all the time.
Lot, and I hate this conversation because
and
I don't
I think the general motivation is, do you support or do you not support?
We're never going to say who we're going to initiate.
I'm going to answer that in my best ability to craft, and it's an unwavering thing. I don't feel intimidated by it. I think it's it's become sort of a stupid question in the sense, not calling you stupid, caller, but in the sense that it's been talked about so much, and the answer is very obvious, and there's not going to be a different answer. There will be traditions that there already are. There are traditions like the Catholic tradition who could give a rat's ass what you're doing with your pee-pee or what's going on between your legs, because they're not a fertility cult. That's not their emphasis. They're not connected to this thing. They're doing their own thing. There's lots of things like that. There's a billion occult orders and things like that do not follow the narrative that only two occult traditions do, which is Gardner and Alexandrian craft. We are the two that have a very strong emphasis. I suppose the OTO may be a third, but they are a little bit more liberal than us in some ways. But you still probably have a role. It exists. It's part of the tradition. It's what it is. It's not going to ever go away. If you don't like it, my advice is don't follow it. If I don't follow Christianity because I don't like Christianity.
But here's the problem. I have to say this. It's super important.
Yeah.
There is this concept that if we exclude someone, or if a practice might not work for someone, because the issue is it going to work for you? If you do not believe...
And is it going to work for the group?
Exactly. If you do not believe in polarity at all between the differing genders...
If you don't believe in polarity if you don't believe in the flesh being spiritual...
Or
if you don't believe that the flesh itself has but this is the thing that I was saying.
I know.
If you don't believe in as above, so below, if you don't believe the flesh itself, if you don't believe the body that you were born into isn't a divine act, if you don't believe that has power, then you're probably not going to jive with a whole lot of things we do.
But that's my main point.
Doesn't mean our way of doing it is the only way of doing it. Anyway, go ahead. Levi's trying to stop me. I'll stop now.
If you have issues with binary sexuality, you're not going to like this religion. No. Period. Second, and that's fine.
And it doesn't matter whether you're gay, straight.
No. Here's the most important point. Here's the most important point. Exclusion does not equal damnation in our religion. So if you're coming from Christianity and it excluded you, and Orthodox Christianity told you, small o Orthodox Christianity told you, that if you're not a part of our group, there's a punishment involved. If a coven tells you, you do not belong in this coven maybe, or it's not a good fit, or maybe our system won't work for you.
You're not in the coven.
You will not be punished for that.
I'm sorry, we only initiate people.
You don't know the power of the dark side.
I'm just going to hit every button now.
Perfect.
But no, that's the thing is there's no punishment, guys. So if somebody says maybe this isn't for you, maybe it's not for you. But again, that doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean you can't go find God. It doesn't mean you can't be spiritual. It doesn't mean you can't go initiate something else.
There's nothing in the craft that actually dictates that we exclude anyone based on the things we all talk about. So there is no reason why a transgendered person or any other kind of person couldn't be potentially initiated into the craft. Non-binary isn't really necessarily a physical thing unless you're a hermaphrodite. I know Levi doesn't like when I say that.
We don't use that term anymore. Intersex.
We by other people.
We by every educated person in America.
I guess I'm not educated. But in any case, so if you don't mentally identify with either sex, that doesn't mean that you're not one.
Yes. Sorry, guys, I had to fix the blips. Thank you to Christian for finding a solution to that. The blips that you hear are when messages come through. We found a awesome solution.
A big part of it, watch our first episode. Whether we like it or not, there is a reality to nature and the universe. We didn't create it. We didn't design it. We embrace it. And, we've got, we're liberal gay guys who are occultists. But, the tradition is older than us. And we joined it because we believe in what it believes. That's why you join a religion or a tradition. Not because you want to shape it to how you think it should be. That's not how you join a religion or why you should join a religion.
But
you don't join Christianity and say, well, yeah, I know this Jesus guy's important, but, can't we accept Buddha too? It doesn't work that way. Reality. I think the modern liberal occult world, myself included, needs a cold shower in reality sometimes.
And again, there's no punishment in it.
Yeah.
So the concept of if somebody says this group might not work for you, this practice might not work for you, the big grand horror of that is, okay, go find another one.
And the
That's
truth
it.
is,
That's
and
it.
I've said it a million times, no one's going to tell you anyway. You could be a straight guy who comes to get initiated by a group, who is from a good family, and they might reject you because you're not good for the group because they think you're a jerk.
It has nothing to do with
I might reject you
rules.
because I think you're ugly and dumb.
Oh my God.
It
I
doesn't
know.
necessarily, we're not going to tell you, and it's okay. Let's put this to another point. In our countries, the United States, the UK, and other, free nations, we have freedom of religion, which is the right to assemble and practice with whom you want and how you want. This is essential, and as a witch, I believe in freedom. So I may not agree with other people's practices or belief systems, but I'm certainly not going to feel like I can call it to task. And no one's going to call mine to task. But I will say, when it comes to my coven, no, I'm not going to tell anyone who I'm going to initiate. I'll tell you what my expectations are. I'll tell you how we do things to some extent. But if someone was going to be initiated, they wouldn't know how or who was going to initiate them until the initiation was actually happening.
And that would be the issue.
Non-negotiable.
Yep. We went down that hole, didn't we?
We didn't. They brought us down. We
I
just
know,
answered.
they did.
But so, you do have to answer it sometimes.
You do.
None of these.
No, I avoided. But no, I think it does come up. Whether it does come
So
up.
if you'd like to call in, and anyone could call in, the number's 504-383-5266.
The screen, Brian.
And it's on the screen.
It's on the screen.
It's on the screen. So fertility gods, who are some really important for, obviously within our craft, we have a particular god and a goddess that's kind of a little bit monotheistic, but, we can play with the pagans. What gods really sing of witchcraft and fertility. I really, obviously Pan, because he was very much associated with, herds, right? And the goat herds or the sheep herds, or was that synonymous at the time? I don't really know.
With animals in flocks.
Animals and flocks. But, yes, it was a really big part of the culture, the Arcadian culture, where he was first worshipped. And a lot of horned gods, after hunting stopped being the main theme, became associated with herds, whether it was
Pastoral gods.
they switched to pastoral, or sometimes even melded with agriculture, which is why you sometimes get horned vegetation gods, because the provider changed because what was providing changed.
Yep.
Predominantly. So they didn't always
Isis and Osiris. That's a big one.
Osiris, Dionysus, they both are associated with
Yep.
horns. A lot of times we forget this. It's kind of a big problem with...
But as fertility gods, too. You asked about
Absolutely.
what gods are fertility
Yes.
gods? Isis and Osiris.
Oh, absolutely.
The regeneration of the Nile and all that.
Isis is one of my favorite fertility gods because of her association with resurrection in the Nile. Making a golden penis. I mean, how fertility can you be? That woman's husband...
Available on Etsy.
She lost her husband's penis, so she made him a robot one made out of gold.
It's a great story.
It is.
Tell your friends. Another one for me, of course, Demeter, Persephone, and Hades. So Eleusis, the Eleusinian mysteries.
People
all
often
about the return of
A
fertility.
lot of underworld gods are associated with fertility.
Very much
'Cause
so.
It's down in the earth.
Yep.
Osiris was one of those. He wasn't considered. It was weird because he was king of the underworld,
But he was also fertility.
but he wasn't actually a god usually like associated with the passage of death as much.
You probably know this. Is it Winnenefer? Which version of him is the one with the huge erect penis?
I don't know.
I think it's Winnenefer, but there's some version of Osiris where he's always
I've seen
erect.
it, yeah.
Even though he's mummified, right? So death and life, right?
One of the things they used to do in ancient Egypt that I love is that during the spring they would make these molds of Osiris in the earth with seeds so that they would grow in the
I
shape
love
of
that.
Osiris. That's like a thing we know.
Do
they
you
did,
remember
yeah.
when we went to the...
And he was always green. He
Always.
was a green man. People don't really... And they say it was death, but no, it was the plants.
Do you remember
resurrection.
when we were in Athens and they had the treasures of Eleusis and that special thing, and they had that huge... There was this amazing thing we saw in Athens. It was this massive thing it was a ritual called the panspermia, which I know sounds dirty, but it means all the seeds in Greek. And it was these little cups. Do you remember that? And they had put a seed of every crop they were going to plant.
I do, yeah.
And then they would bless it at Eleusis. So during the Eleusinian ritual rites, during the initiations, there was a panspermia where they would bless every seed of every plant that was going to be done in the harvest.
Fertility.
I love that.
Yeah.
So that's a big, and the vessels are amazing looking. There are all these little tiny cups, one for each seed, and they're all formed into this big ritual thing that would have been blessed. It's very cool.
I love the folk tradition of John Barleycorn. That is like, it's not technically speaking, I mean, I guess in witchcraft we consider it a god, but officially it's an old poem song. Old John Barleycorn, he's the harvest king.
Yeah.
That sort of image of the harvest king, you get that with obviously like Dionysus or Bacchus, but you have a lot of those sort of folk customs where the gods come up to as obscure individuals like the Green Man or John Barleycorn,
Yeah.
or sometimes local fairy type creatures.
And I also think it's important that, and Brian's mentioned this, so I'm going to go off on it a little bit. At some point, almost all the gods were fertility gods because fertility was crucial to be alive. So in Rome,
Most
for
important,
example,
so.
in Rome,
Mars
was a fertility
he
god.
was hugely a fertility
The priest
god.
of Mars, the Flamen Martialis. The Flamen Martialis would go shake the spear of Mars over the fields every year. So I mean,
what's interesting
really important.
is this is where you get a bit of a difference. When you mirror the Greek and the Roman pantheon, Ares wasn't considered so much a fertility god,
No.
but Mars was.
Yes.
Because there were, I think that the original pre-Greek influenced Mars was probably a little bit more,
Etruscan.
he was a warrior fertility god who then, shifted, whereas Ares was like,
Just bloodshed.
The Greeks at that point in time had become very they had intellectualized their gods into different departments.
And Athena took over smart warfare, right?
Strategy.
And strategy.
Yes.
Ares was bloodshed.
Athena's
right?
my girl. If I was going to go to war, I would not pray to Ares. I would pray to Athena.
Same. Same.
Don't teach me how to crush them. Teach me how to beat them.
Exactly. I don't want to go crazy. I just want to win.
Sometimes that's done economically. Lots of fertility gods, obviously, and in witchcraft, we're taught the myth, and you've all been taught it too, that the oldest gods of humanity were the life-giving, nurturing goddess, and it does happen to be a fact that all of the artistic artifacts that we find early on are of female fertility-oriented symbols, which some people believe are goddesses. Some people might believe it's just women, but it was obviously a spiritual practice involving the female form and fertility. And then later on, you get the hunting god. I think it was a goddess, obviously, I do. But to me, it's irrelevant. They were doing something spiritual, and that was the form they were focusing on.
Yeah.
So goddess or not goddess. Great-great-grandmother or goddess. At that point, was there a difference? I don't know. Yeah.
And there's a lot of forgotten gods of fertility that got subsumed into other ones. Like in the prayer to Isis that's in Apuleius's Golden Ass, he mentions Lucina, which was a very popular childbirth goddess, but she became subsumed into the cults of Diana, into the cults of Isis, into the cults of other goddesses, Venus Genetrix and everything. Oh, another great one, Venus Genetrix, which means Venus the progenitor, right? And that was Venus as the mother of Rome. So not Venus as just the goddess of love, but she was Venus, the one who gave birth to Rome, right? Because she was the mother of,
I am descended from the goddess Venus.
He says this. He says this a lot, people, and believes it.
It's true.
So, that'd be a fun question for our viewers. What god or goddess do you think, Brian, invokes the most for you? And for me, what gods do we bring through for you?
I don't think we've ever done that, so let's not go down that road.
I know, right? I'm not.
I don't want. They'll probably be like Satan.
No, maybe a little. But let us know in the comments.
What if they gave us really horrible ones? You know.
I know, right?
Yeah.
And then I'd be nice, be gentle. But no, Elohim says, vegetation.
Levi's Vulcan.
No, God, no. Ugh.
He looks like a dwarf under a mountain.
Sir. He says, Elohim says vegetation and fertility are the original sources of society, and Göbekli Tepe is an example of this historically. Yes, one of the old temple sites that have been discovered through archaeology really do bring this home.
Or the crescent of, as far as we know right now, the crescent of civilization is where this all comes from.
The Tigris and Euphrates.
And the Nile. That's in the crescent of civilization. Yeah. Egypt was in the crescent of civilization. And one might argue the one that became the most potent and powerful, because it was, obviously Mesopotamia and Babylon were quite impressive, but they didn't quite leave the impact on the world that the Egyptians did. Though I do surmise that they did impact the Egyptians.
Who?
Who's looking at themselves now?
I was reading the questions. I
think that all the cultures within the crescent of civilization impacted each other.
Oh yeah, there's so much interplay and marrying back and forth or whatever.
The Egyptians are the best ones.
I love Egypt. I've been there. Big fan. But yeah, another goddess that came up as one of my favorites. Magna
my blood
Mater,
may be
fertility
British,
cult.
but my heart is Egyptian. Oh wait, my blood is British. My heart is fairy. I don't know. What do I have a heart? What is it?
I was about to say one.
What
heart.
am I?
What are you talking about? Like Brian's heart, please.
Heart of a way.
You just listen to it, and it's like I can hear the ocean and a screaming child far away in a distant room.
It's a sound of terror.
Joyless, just joyless.
No, I got Isis, and you got Magna Mater.
That just shows that he watches the show and knows we like those two.
Yes, and
Hermes, yeah, because
I don't know who's most likely to make men cut their nuts off.
Magna Mater, yeah, Magna Mater.
No, I mean you or me. I know.
It might be Brian on that one, guys. To be honest,
though, making a golden penis does sound my style. Chris, actually, Levi. Here's the whole thing with Levi's Magna Mater thing. Just so you guys know. Magna Mater. I do believe that Levi likes her a lot, but I actually think he likes Isis more. Here's the thing.
I love Isis.
He doesn't normally come across this way, but once in a while he has to have some rebellion against like a cult daddy.
That's not true.
He can't just like agree with everything I say.
I agree with you.
So if I'm like super crazy Isis, he's like, yeah, but Magna Mater.
I like her because...
So we've got to give him this.
We got to give him this. Brian's like, just pity him, people. Let him have this poor, sad...
those were both actually extremely influential cults. Those two... the Magna Mater became more popular... Magna Mater was the first mystery cult, and it is sort of fertility oriented, obviously cutting nuts off and all that stuff. She was the mother goddess, the icon of the mother goddess. She was like, I could be wrong on this, but I think she sort of preceded the cult of Isis in Rome and was the first one that was like really, really popular. However, there were some...
She was always dangerous and foreign, though.
Yeah, so was Isis, but the difference is the cult of Isis was more accepting, and didn't make you cut your nuts off.
Neither did they for everyone. It was just
but I do think that the cult of the Magna Mater was not as popular in Europe as the cult of Isis. But at one point in time, it was the first most influential mystery cult revival in Rome.
It's also more Eastern.
It led the road. I think the cult of Magna Mater paved the way for the cult of Isis in Rome, and they both actually paved the way for the cult of Christianity in a way.
Yep. The Great Mother.
So it's true. So,
but
the Roman Empire was pretty bored with their own gods in their heyday.
Mystery cults got very popular because of that, because they promised something greater than just.
Well, they idolized the Greeks, and well, we're getting off subject.
We are a little bit.
Gonna go on a whole tangent.
We'll make a subject of that one day about mystery cults or something. That'd be a good show.
Probably comes up in every show.
Very interesting choices. But I think for me, the reason I like her as a fertility god is that symbol.
You're only
of,
saying I'm balder because I've got blonde hair.
Yeah, Brian's never going to sacrifice himself for anyone. Like,
well, I would if I
which
got
Balder didn't
something
choose that.
better.
Oh, that's right. Oh, it's a good choice though. Balder didn't sacrifice himself. Remember, he was the beloved only child. You know.
I'm not.
And then, I know, but I'm saying, and then Loki screwed the whole.
I'm
system
more
up.
of a Loki. I'm the twisted middle child. He's the only child. Mama's boy right here. Which is mother. Levi's mother is actually very pretty. How old is she?
57.
She does not look 57.
Yeah.
I saw her pictures recently. I could peg her in her 40s.
I know. She aged well. I did not.
You're not done yet.
That's true. That's not true.
Just keep your hair, but that's
No, I'll start bathing in the blood of the virgins
not
I
the
killed to
same
raise the
thing.
crops.
We could get a transplant.
Never. No. I'm happy with it. But no. So fertility gods. But I think it's very interesting that in witchcraft, I mean, the mother goddess and the horned god, it's not just about the fertility of sexuality, it's also about the cycle of life. So, the whole thing about fertility is also accepting that it ends and accepting that it is reborn. So as a witch, fertility is not, it goes beyond, these gods go far beyond, I'm going to either bless the field or bless a baby. They also go, or I'm the great mother, this very generic sort of thing. It's more about the cycle of biological existence itself. I almost think there's a sort of divine evolution that's embodied in the concept of witchcraft as a fertility cult. So,
And
the
like we
Sabbats
said
reflect that.
before in our last episode, we really dissected a lot of this stuff. It's choppy, but please watch it. It's got a lot of good content where we really pound what we believe about that as far as witchcraft's
fertility
concerned.
pound.
But other fertility gods. What are some other fertility gods that are really good? I think it's often we don't look at things like Diana and Artemis. They've got the modern idea that these are these virgin goddesses, right? But they are goddesses of the hunt.
Yes.
So you've got this female virgin who's providing for you through the kill, through the hood. She's wild and all. That's a real Greek thing in a sense. But the older version of Artemis was actually the clan bear goddess. If you go to really old Artemis stuff before she became the virgin huntress, she was associated with the bear and she was associated with the mother goddess. And there were a whole lot of fertility aspects. And then you likewise go to the what's surmised to be the Etruscan Diana.
Yeah.
And you go to Nemi and places like that, which you would love, by the way.
I would love Nemi.
You get this different Diana. She's no longer this virgin goddess of Rome. She is the mother goddess of the wood. She is the queen of all nature. And there's this whole fertility aspect, So I think a lot of these ideas we get, even the intellectualized ones, are asked because virginity, why was it? It was prized, I think, in the Greek culture and later by Christianity in women because it was a way to control women.
It was misogyny.
But it originates from a veneration of the female life cycle. It originates from a veneration of menstruation because you weren't a maiden because you were prepubescent. You were a maiden because you were sexually available but not married. And that later got translated into hadn't had sex yet, but originally it meant not married, or that was the equation given to it. But you were sexually realized, you were menstruating, and that virgin huntress was menstruating. There's a lot of symbology that goes into that. So, and I don't think that was lost on everyone. I think it was capitalized on because of misogyny.
I love how everybody's talking about, we just said if you were hearing the music outside became a second line for a
No
little
one ever
while.
talks about the Virgin Mary menstruating,
you
but
could
she
hear
would
it.
have.
Wow, that's a line that I wasn't expecting, and it just kind of came out.
Well,
and I was
talk about the blood of Jesus.
no, we're not doing this. We're not doing this.
We just did.
Wait,
These things must be done delicately.
no, sir.
I think it's important that we realize God is a vagina.
No, we're not. You are on air, sir.
I'm really coming into my own with feminism lately. I almost am jealous.
Do you hear
that
this?
I'm not a woman because I really, really think that in the modern witchcraft movement, there needs to be a bit more of it from the not from the Z Budapest types, but from all of us, especially the men. We need to be stepping
Goddess
forward and
worshippers.
saying, hey, come on now. cut it out.
And it's
You know, we started this in the 1950s. It's 2020. Where are the priests of the goddess?
I know.
Eh.
Okay. On that note,
Oh,
I know.
you guys can hear it.
A little bit of jazz in the background now. It's a little lighter.
So, if you'd like to ask a question about tonight's subject, vaginas, Levi's hair, or
No.
any subject on witchcraft,
Please don't.
actually, we'd love to hear from you. We always do. The number is 504-383-5266. Ask Levi a question.
What's wrong with you today?
I'm being too silly lately, and I
Are you
realize
okay?
that. Do you know what I think it is? I
Are
think
you
it's the
okay?
lack of socialization in quarantine.
I think it's just the mind goes a certain way at some point. Like, and I'm gonna put him in a home.
I'm having fun. I'm
Shady
having
Pines,
fun.
Brian.
I'm
Shady
having
Pines.
fun. I'm not being too. I have always said, you know, it's kind of funny because I'm very different from Christian in the sense that I'm the more serious one when it comes to sort of topics like this. But I think in this duo,
I know.
maybe I'm not.
It's funny. It
Yeah,
is funny because Brian's always the Jesuit, and then when he gets between us, he's the jester. And I'm just.
I'm becoming more so because, you know, Levi, it would be very boring if we left this all to his devices.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Educational, though.
It'd be a PBS special. Hi, welcome to Covendom.
Hello. Hello. Oh my God.
Yeah, you gotta
okay.
turn this down.
My laptop's doing one thing, freezing up, and then not. Can you guys hear me?
We
Yes,
can hear you. Yeah.
You've got to turn our video off on your end, though.
Oh, okay. I didn't know how that worked. I'm sorry.
Well, we can hear it.
Yeah. All righty. Well. Okay, and now it's echoing. All right,
Fine,
Brian,
just
Levi,
ask-
you can hear me?
We
All
can
right.
hear you. Just ask the question. Yeah.
Okay, this is Lillian. I'm up in Olympia, Washington,
Hi, Lillian.
and I just finally. I tried to call last week, but things weren't working.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanted to say hello, and I totally love Covendom. Obviously, that's why I always type in. I'll be there. But about the fertility thing, just a kind of an off thought, and I know Alexandrian. You know, that is not like everybody else.
Yeah.
But animal imagery, as far as the god and goddess, I just want to know just like how you both feel about, as far as the fertility aspects, what animal imagery, you know, like just both of you, just kind of a general
Sure.
question. Just felt like bringing it up.
Lots. I mean, the god has horns in witchcraft.
Right.
I am the god who bears the horns. So there is going to be a lot of images of, you know, horned animals. So you're going to have the goat, the bull, the ram, the stag. You know, those are going to be massively influential. What other animal imagery do you use in craft besides Tiki, who's present on screen right now?
So, you know, when I think of the god, obviously, predominantly, the god does come across as some form of horned animal, whether that's the goat, or the ram, or the stag, or the bull.
Mm-hmm.
But also, he comes across as the hawk, or the falcon, or the eagle to
The
me.
leopard.
Sometimes the leopard,
Yeah.
animals of prey, predators, wolves.
Yeah.
Hounds sometimes. Whereas the goddess will come to me, you know, as the great sow or the hen or the bee.
Yeah.
The great mare, you know, a rabbit.
Yeah.
Hares.
Yeah.
Very. So there are animals that have kind of come up in the craft as being sacred to both the god and the goddess, and interestingly enough, do tend to sort of have some sort of fertility aspect about them.
A serpent is a
Yeah.
big one for me, too.
Yeah, serpent.
The
I
serpent.
equate that more with the goddess.
Me, too.
Yeah.
And I know that's interesting, but I actually do, too.
Yeah.
For me, though, Lillian, I really love the image of sort of I often see it as a paired couple thing. So it's the stag and the doe, right, or the bull and the heifer. You know, the starry cow and the great white bull of heaven. Like, you know, that was a big thing.
Sow.
The great sow and the boar and the tusked boar. You know, like that's a big thing for me. But they do come through in that image. It's a good point to bring that up. Is that, you know, animal imagery is part of fertility.
It's actually not that, you know, like depending on what culture you get into, animals are often there. You know, you go to Egypt and they're obviously very prominent, and a lot of the gods have animal heads. When you go into Celtic mythology, usually it's the gods shape change into animals, which is what you predominantly get with the Greeks and the Romans as well, as they shape change into the animals.
Yeah.
So, but it's always there. We get some imagery within the European cultures of still having that horned god or that like a centaur or something like that. So we still have it. But it comes from a certain period in religious history where I think that was more prevalent to identify the forces of nature with animals. Whereas later on, the forces of nature were identified, more closely with the forces of nature. But it's all symbology. The Greeks made it intellectual. Aphrodite's love, Ares' war. Whereas the Egyptians were like, they would see a lion or a fierce cat predator as war because that was the spirit,
the crocodile
of power.
That's so bad.
And likewise, you take the goddess Isis, for instance. She does have the wings of a kite, which is a bird associated with the Nile. So am I pronouncing that right?
A kite. Yeah, it's a bird of prey.
But anyway, it's all there. Yeah.
Also, one of my favorite things about that, Lillian, is that one of the most common titles,
which is where we get our familiars from in witchcraft.
Yes.
I think it's an echo back to that shape change. Because a lot of people, what's your animal familiar? Half the times in most of those stories, the witches were turning into the animals.
Yes.
So there was a sort of same idea going on there. They're symbols for something else. Sorry.
No, what I was going to say is one of the most common titles, Lillian, for the great goddess in ancient cultures. It was like Artemis of Ephesus or Diana or Magna Mater in her Greek and Phrygian forms or whatever. The term was Potnia Theron, which is Greek for mistress of the animals. And, that's why her body is covered in animals in the famous statues from the Temple of Artemis at Ephesus, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world.
I love those. I love those. That's why I just brought it up. I just wanted to hear what you guys had to say.
Yeah, but it was a great question. Thank you.
One of my favorite symbols in sort of a more like Celtic style, even though it's not actually from Britain, is the Gunderstrup cauldron. And inside the Gunderstrup cauldron, you have what's clearly sacrifices and what's clearly, warriors marching to battle that are probably it's probably representing dead souls, because I believe the inside of the cauldron represents the underworld and all that sort of thing. But within the inside of that cauldron, you do have right next to each other, you have what's quite obviously a god and a goddess, or a very prominent male and female figure, and each one is surrounded by animals, living animals. Yeah. And there's a symbology to that you find a lot within a lot of these things. So animals were originally connected very closely to most spiritualities, and I think the Egyptians teach us the most about it. You also get it in Native American shamanism. They're potent symbols. An animal makes a very potent symbol between man and nature.
Yep.
Yes.
So. And, but thank you, Lillian. That was a good question.
Yeah. Okay, I should give someone else a chance to call in. So
of course.
Anyway, I'm here. I'm always watching, and just thank you for being there so much.
Thank you, and have a great evening.
Okay. Bye.
Let me use my little phone buttons. I'm so good.
So Frank has a question I'm going to answer real quick because it's to this show.
So Frank's question for those of you who are watching are, which of, in the Alexandrian tradition, are at the Esbats or the Sabbat celebrations that have fertility front and center? Actually, I will try putting it on the screen for Christian.
The one time.
Boom! You're welcome, Christian.
See, that might make people uncomfortable to ask questions that they're being thrown up there like that.
Well, Frank watches.
Or it might make them feel special. I don't know. You guys let us know. Frank, all of them. All of them, when you really step back and look at it, they all do. They all do.
Yep. And see, watch this. So now we answered Frank's question, and Frank's comment goes away. It's magic.
Is it hard to do? Was it
no,
hard?
It's very easy.
You loved it. Now you're going to do it all the time, aren't you?
Now I'm going to do it all the time.
Levi's like me in the sense he's not one for change, but once he's embraced it, he does it very quickly.
See, that's the truth. We don't change often, but we change well. So I'm going to agree with Brian on that completely, Frank. They're all fertility rituals. Even in the darkest winter, our rituals are for the hope of a brighter spring. I mean, this is the whole concept, right? Fertility is at the core of everything we do. We want life to continue in the universe, right? Biological life. Cyclical, beautiful, messy, evolutionary biological life. I really really love that Brian keeps going back to this concept of flesh and spirit are mirrored in witchcraft. They're not separate. We're not dualists. As above, so below.
This is not really a philosophical religion. We do have it.
We do.
But it is more of a religion of do.
It's a fleshy religion, is what I tell people.
It is a religion of action and do. We do it. One of the things one of the things Levi said very early about my training is that, he would want to intellectualize something, and I'd be like, oh yes, that's very nice. Oh, well and good, you've got opinions. Now let's go do witchcraft. And I really do believe that's at the heart of our training and at the heart of what we do. It's experiential and it's based in the foundations of nature.
Yes.
And it works for me. It's not judgmental.
This bass in the background is intense.
But it is wise. Can you guys hear it? So loud. We should just say we're at a voodoo ritual.
No.
I'll just start twerking.
No. I'm against all of this.
Okay, so questions. Anyone? Come on, we need questions now because we've talked about everything we can possibly think of in 2 shows about fertility.
We did 2 shows.
Have you ever done any specific fertility magic, like that was flat out, like I'm not talking about making your magic fertile, but actually for fertility reasons?
Like pregnancy or making the crops grow or whatever?
Yeah, have you? No. Obviously you have as a group in the sense that we do project sometimes.
We have done in a group things for that. But individually, no.
I have.
Tell me.
I've done 2 spells to help 2 individuals get pregnant. The one worked right away, and the other one I had this weird thing. She was, if she watching, or she should verify the story. I made her a talisman, but I had this weird psychic thing because she was with a man who had a baby from someone else, so they were blaming her. The gods kept telling me or whatever, the message I was getting was, it's not her. It's not her. So when I gave her the talisman, I was like, this is going to work, but not in the way that you think it will. And as far as I know, she kept it for a very long time. Well, come to find out, she's got a very beautiful son now, but he was actually infertile and wasn't really his kid from the previous marriage.
Oh, wow.
He was the one that was infertile.
Brian's just out here messing up homes.
No, they're separated now.
Just
they're
destroying
with different
lives.
people. I think he's still raising that son as his own. It was not intentional.
The gods.
But it wasn't her.
Decreed you are not the father.
It was always him.
Yeah.
So she didn't really need the fertility magic, which is why I got the weird thing. It was like, I'm making fertility for her, and she didn't really need the fertility. It was him. So I kept getting this weird feeling.
So the gods were like, well, I mean...
The other weird thing that happened is that my aunt had asked me to bless... my aunt and my uncle by marriage, had asked me to bless their new apple orchard. And this is when this happened actually right before I was about to receive my very first degree. So I wasn't an initiate yet. And so... I really worked, well, I'm not going to say how I did it right now anyway, but I blessed their apple orchard. Several months later, I get this phone call. What did you do to those apples? I said, well, I blessed them. He was a generational apple farmer. Like his father was an apple farmer, an apple grafter, they called them, from Ireland. They were very, very much generational apple farmers. He had never seen apple trees bear fruit that quickly, and they were great big apples.
See, look at Brian out here ruining families and helping apples.
Helping apples. So I definitely have. Plus, with the priestess, once we blessed wheat fields.
Yeah.
She kept saying, we should go knocking on farmers' doors and offering them to bless their crops. I don't know if anything came of those blessings, because we didn't actually do it. We just did it because we were like, here we are blessing crops. Go ahead.
So, I think, wrapping up.
I told him not to order food.
Well, we're at the ending time. Brian would go on forever. But no, thinking about wrapping up, I will say this.
So before we wrap up, last chance for calls.
Brian's desk.
Elohim.
No.
504-383-5266. Witchcraft. No, that's Patricia Crowther's.
Listen, people. I'm going to need you to not call this phone right now. No, I'm kidding.
No.
But all honesty, thinking about, we've done 2 shows on fertility.
Yeah, I done wassailed those apples, Elohim. I wassailed that field.
First of all, that's not what that means.
Actually, it does.
Wassail is cider.
Beating the bounds and wassailing. It's another phrase. Yes, wassailing. It was a thing before that happened. Beating the bounds and wassailing. They would go through the apple orchards doing drums and drinking cider.
Well, yeah,
and sometimes it was called wassailing the orchards.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a thing.
I love that.
Or beating the bounds.
I love that.
Yeah. See what you don't know.
Many things. Many things.
Sure, he can tell you about Aristotle, but he knows nothing
about apple
fertility.
orchards. Okay, so fertility. We've done 2 shows on it. That's enough.
Our point is, when you're doing witchcraft, don't wear a condom.
No, Brian, no.
No, that's really true, really. Honestly.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is.
I'm trying to find a button. I don't
Why
know.
would you ever wear a condom in witchcraft? I'm not talking about sex. I'm being metaphorical.
I know you are.
Let the magic flow.
Okay. So this has been fun.
Too much responsibility.
I know. I would like to say thank you to everybody who called in today. Do we have a topic for the next one?
We do, but I'm going to have to look because I gave you 2 ideas and I liked both of them. And I can't remember the one I think is going to be next.
Okay. You will get information about that.
So we'll post our next show. So anyway, to summarize this, we're having a lot of fun. It's sort of a cheeky conversation. I think that it's, yes, we're supposed to be polite and regal and all that sort of thing. But sex and fertility go hand in hand, and it's a messy conversation. And I think it's important to make it fun and to have a little humor about it because it makes people uncomfortable. And under the subject of witchcraft, we really shouldn't have that hang up.
No, you should be able to joke and fun. I'm teasing.
The British wouldn't do it the way I'm doing, obviously. I'm being very American about it. It's my husband's influence, everyone.
American is just code for tacky.
You know what Maxine told me recently? She said, our issue was we were too obvious about everything.
Too obvious?
It's too obvious.
Americans or just
Americans?
Us? Oh, okay.
No, not us, like not the show, but no, it's an American thing to say something very obvious.
Oh yeah, 100%.
Not
Americans
subtle.
Subtlety's not our thing. No. But no. So next time you'll get information about that. I'm glad we did these 2 shows though. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Anyway, life, affirming, the plants, the animals, the people in your life. Making things grow. This planet needs fertility. It needs rejuvenation. It needs resurrection. So if you're thinking you're on the path of witchcraft, realize this is our first and foremost calling. It's not how to curse. It's not how to get a sexy new boyfriend. Those things are fun, but they're not what we're really about.
And on that note, we will see you next time. Thank you for joining us all. I cannot wait to see you again. Many, many blessings, and we will see you next time, guys.
There were Coven.